28-year-old brother Mark used to date my 26-year-old fiancée, Jen, a year ago. For context, they started dating in August 2022. They were only together for a month before he broke up with her because he got bored of being in a relationship and never really wanted to settle down. Anyway, at the time they were dating, I was in another state, so I had no idea he had a girlfriend and no idea who Jen was until I met her. Jen and I met at a bar when I got back in October, and we hit it off really well. She was easily the most beautiful and intelligent woman I had ever met, and we met a few more times before making our relationship official. We moved fast until December, when I finally mentioned her to my family and suggested they meet her at Christmas. They knew I was in a relationship, but I'm not very open about my personal life, so I kept the details about her to a minimum until I knew how serious we were. My parents asked to see pictures and started passing my phone around the table. Mark saw it and exploded. Calling me a bad brother for dating as my ex-girlfriend was demanding I break up with her. I refused when I asked Jen about it. She confirmed they had dated and gave me details about their breakup. It took a few weeks, but eventually Mark stopped mentioning he was seeing his ex, and I thought I was over it. On Jen's birthday this year, I took her to a fancy dinner with both our families and her closest friends and asked her to marry me. Mark got furious once again and exploded because I proposed, which my sisters and I immediately confronted. The incident happened last weekend. Mark had been pretty quiet about all of this. For the past 2 months, I hadn't seen him much, and I thought he had cut back on contact with me, which didn't bother me. Then he invited me and my parents and sisters to dinner at his apartment. I thought it was strange, but my parents and sisters were coming too, so we agreed. Dinner was fine, nothing too fancy, and we moved to the living room to talk. About 30 minutes of normal conversation passed. Mark got up and told us he had an announcement to make. He gave a long speech about being happy to have his family there for his big moment. Then he got down on one knee and pulled out a cheap ring while asking Jen to marry him. Jen was confused and obviously uncomfortable, so she demanded he put away and stand up. My dad tried to grab Mark, but I got there first and punched him. I won't go into much detail about what happened from there, mainly because I was too angry to even hear most of it. But he did say something like he wanted to show me that Jen wasn't really interested in me and just wanted to get revenge on him before things got worse. My parents dragged me out and promised to talk to him. It's been a few days since it happened, and I'm still angry. I don't know what to do at this point. I'm scared Jen might have second thoughts about marrying me because of this. Any suggestions? Edit. First of all, thanks for reading and replying. I've been reading the comments between last night and this morning, and there were some valid points. There's no update since then. The only people I've spoken to since that dinner are Jenny, my little sister. I want to clarify a few things I saw in the comments. Jen and I are newly engaged. It was one of those feelings where we both knew we were in this for the long haul, however fast it may be. I'm sure that when we met, I was the one who approached her, not the other way around. I don't know if she knew or suspected that we were related. I asked her after I found out they were dating, and she said she had no idea. I had no reason to doubt that, but I can admit that the seemingly overreaction from Mark raises red flags. I had no idea that she and Mark were dating when I met her. Mark and I aren't close at all. We used to be, but as we grew older, we drifted apart and spoke less and less. Before I moved back, we didn't talk much except on special days like her birthday or mine. She knew my family, but not very well, until I decided I was ready to introduce her. When she and Mark saw each other again, I didn't sense any lingering feelings between them. She didn't treat him like a stranger, but she wasn't overly affectionate with him either. I was told this was a relationship that lasted about a month. I didn't think I needed Mark's permission to ask her to marry me, but maybe I was wrong. I'm not sure. That said, I plan to talk to Mark this weekend to put everything on the table. And to find out what's going on, I never asked for her side of the story about their relationship, which is my fault for not doing my part properly. If anything important or enlightening happens, I'll update, but for now, that's all I have. Comments where I responded. Don't give it comments like, but she's family. Fortunately, I haven't heard that she's family comment much. Aside from my mother and some aunts, they know me well enough to know that our relationship isn't close enough for me to tolerate their disrespect, especially towards my fiancé. It would be a waste of time to say fiancé. Yes, I don't think I have to worry about her going back to him. I'm sure she can't stand him either. Update 1. First of all, I want to thank everyone for reading. It's been a busy weekend, so I haven't had a chance to reply to many people, but I edited my answers to the most common questions I saw in the comments of the original post. Again, thank you. I appreciate everything, even the criticism. Now for the update. I called Mark and asked him to meet me at my house to talk. I told him I would prefer Jen to be present for the conversation, but that it was okay if he didn't want her there. He agreed to talk to both of us and showed up at my house around noon today. There was silence for a few minutes before the conversation began. I apologized for not letting him know I was going to propose to Jen and for hitting him. He said it didn't matter, but he appreciated the apology. I told him what Jen had said about the relationship and the breakup when I asked her about it and asked if it was true. Basically, I told him that his reaction throughout this had been extreme, and I wanted to make sure I didn't misinterpret their relationship or minimize how serious it was. He confirmed that they only dated for a few weeks and that he broke up with her because he lost interest. Jen asked if he was acting like that because he still had feelings or regrets about ending things with her. He said he could admit he thought she was more attractive than when he last saw her, but there were no feelings or regrets. He said he just didn't like seeing a girl with his older brother, even if it was short-term, and as a man, he shouldn't have broken this law by pursuing things with his ex. I reminded him that I had no idea they had dated, so it wasn't like he consciously did this knowing their history together. He ignored me and said it didn't matter. I still should have dumped him. He insisted that if the roles were reversed, he would have done the same, which I doubt. I asked him why he proposed if he didn't have any lingering feelings. Basically, to sum it up, Mark was talking about it with one of his friends who was around when Mark and Jen were dating, and the guy suggested the idea that maybe Jen knew from the beginning that we were related and was doing this to get revenge on him. Considering that Jen had been obsessed with him after they broke up, he and his friend thought it would be a good idea to test it. To see if they were right, he came up with the idea of proposing to her and seeing if she would leave me for him. Jen asked him to elaborate because he thought she was obsessed with him, and he told her that he heard she was asking about him after the breakup and that she was still frequenting the places they used to go. So it was a valid assumption. Then, when she suddenly showed up with her brother, it confirmed his suspicions. Jen told him that she had only asked about him once after the breakup, and that she had been frequenting those places with friends before they started dating, and that she wouldn't avoid them because of a breakup. She also told him that she was offended by the idea that she would stoop so low as to stalk him just to get revenge on him. He shrugged and gave her a half-hearted apology, but said that she had to see it from his point of view. He asked if he really didn't know, and she told him that she didn't notice the resemblance between them until they were in the same room, and that they didn't act alike at all, so it never crossed her mind, and he said that's fine. He pretty much ended the conversation before leaving. He told me he could withdraw his invitation to the wedding because he can't support our relationship knowing he used to date her. I told him not to worry about it since he was likely to be uninvited anyway. It's been a few hours since our chat, and I'm feeling better. My parents aren't too happy that he was uninvited, but they understood it was a mutual decision and probably for the best. My sisters told me they knew he didn't have a good reason to be an idiot, and they don't blame me for not wanting him at the wedding for now. I'm going to limit contact with Mark, and I doubt he'll contact me anytime soon. Once again, I want to thank everyone for reading and commenting, and if anything significant happens, I'll update again. Comments where I answered why she didn't know your family. We hadn't talked much about my family at the beginning of our relationship. I left home to get away from them, especially my parents, and I started reconciling at my sister's request. When I decided to return home, I was honest in saying that I didn't have a close relationship with them when Yen asked, and she was okay with staying in the dark considering the circumstances. Update 2. I couldn't post this in the same forum, so I'm posting it directly on my profile in case anyone is interested in an update. It's been a while since I posted, but a few things have happened since my last conversation with Mark. I've had little contact with Mark since our last conversation. I haven't called him, and he hasn't called me. Our only interactions have been at family gatherings. For now, my mom is upset because Mark still isn't invited to my wedding. It started with a comment made during my younger sister Sophie's 22nd birthday party. Her boyfriend of, I think, for years proposed to her at the end of the night, and we sat down to talk about what she envisioned for her dream wedding. She talked a bit about wanting a destination wedding, and her ideas for the cake and dress. Then she said something like, "Teddy, I know Mark is banned from your wedding, but you wouldn't mind if he came to mine, would you?" I laughed and told her I couldn't be mad about her guest list, even if I wanted to. My mom gave me a weird look and asked if Mark still was invited. I told her no, and she got upset. She said she thought he was jokingly said I was being unreasonable by going ahead with the band since he's family. He accused me of holding a grudge just to be mean. I reminded him that he and I had agreed he wouldn't be coming. Then I told him this wasn't the time to talk about my wedding since it was Sophie's day, and if Mark or she wanted to discuss it, they could call me later. Sophie teased my mom a bit for trying to make her special day about Mark, and my mom dropped the subject. For those of you who might be wondering, Mark wasn't at Sophie's party because he apparently had to work and couldn't attend. A few days later, my mom stopped by and said she wanted to talk about my wedding. She asked why I was so determined to keep Mark from coming. She said I shouldn't be so insecure about Mark and Jen's past relationship, and that disinviting him was overstepping my bounds. I told her that Mark and I had mutually agreed he wouldn't be at the wedding, and that he could talk to me about it if he had a problem with it. We argued, and she said that if I wasn't going to invite Mark again, then she wouldn't come either because I was excluding her son. I shrugged and told her that if that's what she wanted, then she could throw her invitation in the trash because I wasn't going to beg her to come. She asked if I would really be okay with her not attending, and I told her it wouldn't be the first time she'd miss one of my events because of Mark. She said I was being an idiot for bringing up her past mistakes and stormed off. Then I started getting messages and calls from her and some family members about the whole situation, saying I was wrong and suggesting peace. Jen has also been getting messages from my mom asking her to talk to me and convince me to change my mind, but as far as I understand, she hasn't been responding so far. Most of my mom's family are in solidarity with her and won't be attending, while my dad and his family, which is just my aunt and uncle and their 2 kids, agree with me and will still be coming. My sisters are also going to the wedding, and, of course, Jen's family too. I also spoke to Mark about it and asked him if he had a problem with not having an invitation. He said he uninvited himself in the first place and doesn't understand why people are making such a big deal out of it, because he still doesn't want to go. He told me to leave him out of it because he's not involved and said he would tell her that too. For now, I'm having little contact with my mom, but my dad and I are still on good terms. I'm still deciding whether to invite my mom and her family again if they change their minds about the boycott, but the chances are low. I also told my dad, which he understands. For now, Jen and I have started looking for a smaller venue for the wedding since the guest list is significantly smaller. Update 3. My mom was uninvited from the wedding indefinitely. About 2 weeks after she decided not to come, she stopped by and said she wanted to clear the air and talk things through. We agreed and invited her to dinner. Jen made her a plate of food, and I asked her if she still wasn't planning on coming to the wedding. She said that even though she wanted to, she couldn't get over not inviting Mark because of a simple mistake. I reminded her that her simple mistake was proposing to my fiancé with me sitting less than 3 feet away, and she said it was just a joke. Jen asked her why she wanted to talk, if she still felt the same way about Mark coming to the wedding. She said she wanted to talk to Jen and hoped Jen would listen and convince me to invite Mark again. Apparently, she assumed I was at work and could talk to her alone. Jen politely told her she understood her thought process, but she wouldn't have had that conversation without me there anyway, since it involves my brother. My mom made a comment to the effect that Jen was weak and couldn't have a conversation without me doing the thinking for her, which started a pretty heated argument between the 3 of us. Before Jen told her to leave, she got up and started walking toward the door, and my mom followed her, still yelling at her. At this point, she's yelling about how I'm tearing our family apart. As Jen was unlocking the front door, my mom grabbed her hair and threw her to the ground, still screaming, hit her, and tried to scratch her face. I pulled her away from her and threw her outside. She banged on the door for a few minutes while I made sure Jen was okay before she left and called us repeatedly. When I was sure Jen was okay, I texted my mom and told her not to bother contacting me again because we would never speak to her again. I called my dad and my sisters and told them what happened too. My dad was shocked and tried to make excuses, saying that she had been stressed about the whole situation for a while. My sisters said they knew she would eventually snap, since she has always been crazy, and they said they would come over to make sure Jen was okay. I asked Jen if she wanted to press charges, but she declined and said she just wanted to cut off contact with her forever. I told her that was obvious, but that she should still talk to the police since she was physically assaulted, but she doesn't want my mom arrested. My sisters and Jen's mom came over to comfort her, thankfully, so she's okay. My mom is locked out on everything until Jen says otherwise. I really don't know what to do now. Jen doesn't want to go to the police because she would feel guilty about being arrested for this, but my sisters and I want to convince her to do it, and I at least want to document it in case something happens in the future. Comments where I replied, all of this could have been avoided if Mar had sat down with your mom and taken responsibility. He absolutely could, but I don't think he knows what responsibility means. I really think he thinks he has nothing to do with our mother's actions, and I don't think anything I say will be enough to convince him that everything she does is for him and his own selfish benefit. Jen is still against formal charges, but after reading some of your comments and after a long conversation about how this could escalate, she agreed to document it with the police just in case something happens. She wants to talk to my dad about the possibility of him going back to therapy or some kind of treatment for his erratic behavior. And of course, we still have no contact. Some background on my relationship with my parents. Some people were asking questions about my mom, and my decision not to be honest with Jen about my relationship with my parents. I suppose I could give some background on why we're so distant. As some of you said, Mark was the golden boy. Mark was my mom's spoiled child, and she didn't do much to try and hide it. They didn't spend much time with my sisters, not like normal parents do with their children, unless they had to. But they spent time with Mark as often as possible, like taking him shopping while we were babysitting, or bringing him his favorite food and toys from the store when they shopped on their own. He usually got better things compared to the rest of us, like new and expensive clothes while ours were secondhand, or new toys just for him, in contrast to old toys that we had to share. When Mark messed up, I was punished for not being a good role model and for not teaching him the right way to behave. For example, Mark went through a phase of breaking his toys, and I got punished because he obviously learned behavior from me. When he was 8, Mark got into trouble at school for trying to push a child down the stairs. I was given a 2-week punishment and told to apologize to the child for not teaching him properly. When I turned 13, I insisted my parents start giving me chores. They agreed as long as I did them, like mowing the lawn, taking out the trash, raking leaves, etc. It was usually around $25 a week to help me start saving. Mark saw I was getting money and begged my parents to give him an allowance too. Instead of making him work, they gave him $0 of my allowance money each week because we were doing a good job with our chores. Even though he never did anything when I asked him to help, he'd say it wasn't his job to do chores, so why should he bother? It was around this time that I really started to distance myself from my brother. By the time I got to high school, we only spoke to each other when we needed small favors or when we absolutely had to. I got my first job when I turned 17 because I finally wanted to have my own car and earn money that they couldn't force me to give to Mark. My older sister, Maggie, helped me open my own bank account and showed me how to budget. I saved my money and bought my first car at 18 after all my hard work. When Mark got his license, my parents asked me to let him use my car to get around and practice driving. Reluctantly, I agreed, and for a while, the arrangement was fine. Mark used my car when he didn't need it and kept it in pretty good condition. When he expressed a desire for my parents to buy him his own car, my mom came to me and told me to give him my car because he needed it more. When I refused, she threatened to kick me out. We had a fight that night, which ended with her giving my car to Mark and taking me to transfer ownership to him in the following days. Since I had nowhere else to go at the time, I simply accepted it and signed the transfer. When I graduated from high school, both my parents skipped my graduation because Mark didn't want to sit through a long ceremony just to watch me receive a piece of paper, and my mom didn't want to leave him alone at night. So I only had the support of my sisters and uncles who wanted to take me out to dinner, but ended up having to take me home. My parents' request, because they prepared a dinner for me to make up for it, was a dinner I couldn't eat because my mom put shrimp and chicken on the same plate, and I'm allergic to shellfish. In my first year out of high school, I worked 2 jobs to buy another car. At the start of the new school year, I moved away to go to college and cut off contact with them. They were mainly my mom and SoFi. They tried to contact me during the first few months through social media, but I never responded. I told SoFi that I would also be cut off if she kept trying. When she couldn't reach me through SoFi, she tried to contact my older sister Charlotte, and sometimes through Maggie and Mark until I threatened to file a restraining order for harassment. It was a lie because I had no idea how to do it, but it managed to scare them off, and the most I received from her were happy holidays. Over the years, around the time I moved back, Charlotte told me that they had been seeing a family therapist at her request, and my parents wanted to apologize for their treatment of us. I was hesitant, but I agreed as long as they were genuine. The reconciliation process began when I returned home. That doesn't even scratch the surface of everything they put me through, and it was very difficult to begin letting them back into my life. When I met Jen, I wasn't sure how my relationship with her was going, nor with my parents. I didn't want to mention my family at all, mostly because I was ready to cut off contact again if necessary. Jen understood it was a sensitive subject and didn't press for more information. I hope this clarifies some of the questions I've been seeing come up in comments where I've responded. The car wasn't a hill I was willing to die on, as the damage was already done. Even now, it's hard to believe Mark was a favorite. There was nothing really special about him. I don't mean to say it as an insult. He was just a normal guy. My parents didn't have fertility problems. He wasn't a miracle. He wasn't a food ticket. They didn't have marital problems. And they weren't using a baby as a Band-Aid. He was simply born, and they decided to love him more than us. Are you sure you're not adopted? I'm biological. Unfortunately, they couldn't deny me, even if they wanted to. I used to make excuses for them. But after a while, I had to admit that they are just 2 people who should never have had children. I want to thank everyone who has taken the time to give me advice on what to do in the future, and all the kind messages and comments I have received in the last few days and weeks. Jen and I have read the comments together, and everything is appreciated. To answer the most common question about why I chose to reconnect after all, the short answer is because I would do anything for my sisters. Charlotte wanted the whole family to be present for the birth of her first child and to help her while she adjusts. She was never the type to ask for much growing up, so when she asked me if I would be willing to try for her, I agreed because it would make her happy too. I think part of me hoped that maybe they would have changed. I don't regret trying to reconcile either. My parents are still terrible, but I met the love of my life, so I consider it a victory. Update 4. Some people want to know if there's an update. So here goes. I'm sorry if this is messy or confusing. A lot has happened. We filed a report with the police, and they told us that even though Jen doesn't want to pursue anything further, it's not up to us to decide if it goes any further, but they would take our preference into account. We provided fairly decent evidence of the assault, including photos of Jen's face and text messages with my parents discussing what happened. They advised us to report and document any future incidents with my mom in case anything else happens. Considering where we live, I doubt this case will go anywhere, but at least we have it on record. I receive around 100 angry text messages telling me that they at least spoke to her about the incident. My mom tried to corner me as I was leaving work and yelled at me for trying to ruin her life. She kept yelling that I was a terrible son for trying to get her arrested over a small misunderstanding and that she didn't understand what I had done to deserve being punished like this. I told her that if she didn't like being in legal trouble, then she shouldn't have hit Jen. She demanded that I tell the police to forget about it. The report, which I refused to give, I told her exactly what the officer said about it being out of my hands. She threw a tantrum in the parking lot and hit me several times, only on the chest and arm, before security intervened and removed her from the property. I had to talk to my boss about the incident. Fortunately, she understood everything that was happening after I explained what was going on. When I got home, I told Jen what happened. She was upset and asked me to discuss the plan with my family in the future. It was a long conversation, but we took the advice of some ready users and decided to completely cut off contact with my family, apart from my sisters. We agreed that having them in my life is adding unnecessary stress for both of us, and we're not even married yet. She told me she wanted to consider moving out, putting some distance between us and my family. She said she tried to stay out of my family's problems because it's not her place, but she refuses to tolerate my mom's abusive behavior or my dad's enabling it. Much more was said, too much to put in this post, but I agreed with her that it was more trouble than it was worth, and I didn't want to put up with this anymore either. I also agreed to go to therapy, and she's helped me find a therapist. I decided to call my dad after our talk and tell him I was cutting off contact. He didn't answer the first time I called, so I left a message asking to have a long conversation. When he called me back, he asked if it was okay for my mom to be present during the conversation. I told him it was fine, since she also needed to hear what I had to say. The conversation went pretty much as you might expect. I told them both that Jen and I were cutting them out of our lives. My dad demanded to know why I would do something like that after all the trouble of repairing our relationship. I told him that this whole thing with Mark has shown me that nothing is really repaired between us, and as far as they're concerned, the world revolves only around my mom and my younger brother. I told him that their continued favoritism toward Mark has brought our relationship to a point of no return, and that I wasn't interested in clinging to a failing relationship. I told him I agreed. I wanted to reconcile for Charlotte's sake, but I don't appreciate all the contempt shown towards me and Jen, and I wouldn't tolerate it anymore for both of our sakes. I specifically told my mom that I was tired of her using me as a scapegoat for her poor parenting and Mark's attitude. I also told her I would never forgive her for what she did to Jen, to me and to my sisters while I was growing up. She started saying how she should move on like my sisters have, but I interrupted her and told her she should accept her forgiveness and move on because she would never receive it from me, especially after everything she's done these past few weeks. She started crying and asked me how I could treat her like a villain. I told her she could only be angry with herself because I hadn't done anything wrong. She cried harder and told me how much she regretted having me and how I had only tried to ruin her life. This started a heated argument between her and Jen once again, and Jen told her, in much more colorful words, that she was disgusting and many other nice names for saying something like that to me. I don't know if she left the room or just decided to shut up, but my mom stopped talking when Jen finished speaking to her. My dad said he wasn't okay with being excluded from my life and asked me to try to understand my mom's point of view. He said she was also struggling because her children were at odds and that it was unfair to punish her for her "we struggled to raise and care for each other." The last thing she said was that we were family and that I shouldn't let past mistakes stop us from moving forward together. I told her that the only person who ever cared about me was Mark and herself, and that there was nothing she could say or do to change my mind. I told her it was up to her if she wanted to keep my number, but that I would block her and my mom everywhere and never contact her again. Then I hung up. Afterwards, I sent a long email with the link to my post attached to my entire family, uninviting everyone except my aunt and uncle and my sisters to the wedding. I hadn't cried in a long time, but Jen held me while I cried after writing the email and reassured me that we would be okay. My sisters also got in touch with me after reading the email. I apologized to Charlotte for not being able to continue reconciling the way she wanted, but she told me it was fine, and that it wasn't my fault I had to cut them off again. My family's response has been quite mixed. Some are angry because I aired family problems on a public internet forum, while others are angry with my parents because they never knew I was so bad. The last person I spoke to about all of this was Mark. He asked if I was excluding him too, and I told him no, but that I also would make an effort to communicate with him. He didn't argue and simply wished me well with the wedding. We haven't spoken since. Right now, Jen and I are looking for a new place to stay. The plan is to move closer to Jen's brother. He lives approximately 3 hours from where we are now, and Jen and I like the city he's in. I spoke to my boss about relocating, and Jen is exploring the option of working 100% remotely or possibly finding a new job. And once again, our plans have changed. Given that the guest list is significantly smaller, my brother-in-law is considering letting us use his lake house for our wedding. I don't plan to post any more about this unless the sky falls, at least not until the wedding, because I want to move on with life. But I will try to answer any questions some of you may have. Thank you. Happy Holidays edition. It took a few days to post this, and I had to keep removing details before I could publish it. If anything is unclear, I'll answer as many questions as I can. Comments where I replied, your mom might try to find out where you're moving. I'm already anticipating the consequences of moving. She's going to follow us when we move because that's how crazy she is. When she doesn't get what she wants, she becomes obsessive until she's forced to stop. I talked to a lawyer friend about a possible restraining order to stop her before she starts. Thanks for the well wishes. Happy Holidays. Mom read the comments. According to SoFi, she's read many of them and doesn't think strangers on Reddit have the right to tell her she's a bad person. I don't think there will be any more updates from me. I wish you all the best, but as far away from me and my family as possible.